How would you react if an old black man, dressed in a wrinkled coat and dragging a sack full of coins, quietly walked into a bank and said, "I'd like to make a deposit"? Would you help him or reject him at first glance? It was early morning. The city still lay sleepy under a thin layer of mist. On a main street that was usually bustling during rush hour, a man stood silently in front of the large glass window of an EverTrust Bank branch. His coat was threadbare, his jeans faded, his sneakers dusty, and his baseball cap pulled low to cover most of his face. He was slightly hunched, with a heavy canvas bag slung over his left shoulder. Every step he took gave off a familiar clinking sound, the noise of coins colliding inside a frayed cloth sack. No one recognized him. No one could have guessed he was Malcolm Everett, the founder and CEO of EverTrust Financial, one of the largest banking empires in the United States. The black man once hailed as the master of financial trust, the man who had stood on a Harvard stage to speak about ethics in business. But today he wasn't here in that role. He came as an ordinary man, a man whom society and even the very staff at the bank he built might overlook. The sliding glass doors opened. No one greeted him. Inside, the branch lobby was brightly lit, spotless and luxurious, a space designed to impress, yet suffocatingly cold. Malcolm entered. No one looked up. No one smiled. Not a single look of kindness. He pushed a small, squeaky cart toward the teller counter. Behind the glass, a blonde woman was staring at her screen. Her name tag read, Lauren. "Good morning," Malcolm said, his voice deep and soft like the morning mist. "I'd like to make a deposit." Lauren raised an eyebrow and quickly glanced at the heavy bag placed on the counter. "Coins?" Malcolm nodded. "Yes, all coins I've saved over many years." Lauren scoffed silently, a laugh that made her lack of sympathy clear. "This bank isn't a coin sorting center, sir," she said, suppressing a sigh. "And honestly, if you're planning to deposit that one coin at a time, maybe try another branch. Or better yet, another bank." Malcolm remained silent. He looked at Lauren, then turned his eyes to the young man beside her, Chadley, who was chewing gum and shaking his head in irritation. "Another old black man wanting to dump a bunch of found coins," Chadley mumbled, loud enough for Malcolm to hear. Still, Malcolm wasn't angry. He stayed quiet, but his eyes began to drop, not out of shame, but disappointment. In the back, a middle-aged man in a gray suit, Douglas Crane, the branch manager, was speaking with a well-dressed customer. Though he caught sight of Malcolm from a distance, he didn't bother coming over. It was as if someone like that wasn't worth speaking to. "I'm sorry, but no one has time to count all that today," Lauren pressed. "Don't you know how busy we are? Also, do you even have an account here?" "I do," Malcolm replied, "and I believe this is a trustworthy place to deposit money." Lauren sighed. "This bank is not like those pawn shops on the street, sir." "We have rules." Malcolm tightened his grip on the bag's strap, his gaze falling silent. The room became unusually quiet. People nearby started to notice, not out of curiosity, but discomfort. A few frowned. Some stepped back as though afraid the sack would burst open and spill out poverty. He stood there, an elderly black man alone, carrying a bag full of coins, trying to deposit them into the very bank he had built, only to be turned away because he didn't look like someone wealthy. Malcolm didn't need to speak. He didn't need to raise his voice, because he was watching, remembering, measuring the truth. Somewhere in the back, kindness was still silently waiting for a chance to speak. But he knew that today, he had begun in exactly the right place. "This is just ridiculous," Lauren muttered, her eyes fixed on the bag of coins as if someone had dragged a trash bin into the lobby. Chadley stood behind her, scoffing. "Maybe he collected this from coin laundries around the neighborhood, huh?" Lauren smirked. "Yeah, or fished them out of vending machines. People like him probably used to, bending down a lot." They laughed together, not the kind of laughter that comes from amusement, but from disdain. Malcolm remained standing, calm, silent. His eyes scanned the room and caught the look of annoyance from a female customer waiting in line. A man behind her whispered to his wife, "Maybe he doesn't realize this is a bank for VIP clients?" Then another employee, Beth, walked up, dropped a folder on the counter, and glanced Malcolm up and down. "Oh dear, Lauren," You should tell him to go to one of those coin machines at the supermarket. That would be easier. Lauren nodded. Exactly. Or just count it at home and deposit it online. Who even deposits physical cash these days? Especially coins. Malcolm gave a slight smile. Not the smile of joy, but of someone who had seen this too many times before. He placed his hand on the mouth of the bag and gently brushed the worn fabric. I'm only asking to deposit this into my account, he said quietly. Every coin in here is sweat, effort, time. Lauren raised an eyebrow. Sweat? At your age, you're almost in the grave. How much can you possibly do to earn 5 cents at a time? Chadley laughed. Maybe he sells old soda cans. There's money in scavenging, I hear. Lauren wrinkled her nose and turned to Beth. If you ever see me dragging a sack like that into work, you'll know I've officially quit banking. Some customers nearby heard clearly. No one intervened. No one stepped up. Only the old man Malcolm Everett stood there, listening to every word that cut through skin and bone. Inside his sack was over $150,000 saved from various sources, separated, stored in boxes, drawers, and coin shipment envelopes from charity events and former branches. But no one knew. All they saw was the surface, the shell of poverty. Branch manager Douglas Crane finally stepped out. He was tall, half-bald, with a dry voice and a power-dripping gaze. What's going on here? He asked without even glancing at Malcolm. Lauren quickly responded. A client wants to deposit a sack of coins but didn't make an appointment, and it's unclear what the purpose is. Douglas shot a quick look at the bag, frowned, then scanned Malcolm from head to toe with an icy stare like he was inspecting leftover stock. I'm sorry, sir, but this is a commercial bank, not a recycling center. Malcolm looked up and met his eyes. I'm not recycling, I'm depositing. This money is mine. Douglas sighed and stepped back half a pace, as if someone had just asked to crash on his couch. You realize clients like you often disrupt our systems, right? Lauren interjected. Besides, if we have to count every coin, my staff won't get lunch. We serve clients, not coin collectors. Douglas folded his arms. I'm afraid you should go elsewhere, or donate the money to a charity. They might actually thank you for saving up all these years. The room turned ice cold. Every word they spoke didn't just insult the old man standing before them. They stripped bare the nature of a service culture built on judgment, not respect. Malcolm slowly nodded. He didn't resist. He only said, Thank you. I've learned a lot today, and I promise, tomorrow you'll learn something too. They laughed, a quiet laugh, but bitter. None of them knew tomorrow would be a day they would never forget. Malcolm had just finished his words. Tomorrow you'll learn something too. The room fell silent as if all the air had been sucked out. Douglas Crane forced a laugh, while Lauren turned her face away as though trying to escape that sentence. A few staff shrugged and some customers whispered to each other. As Malcolm slowly dragged the sack of coins off the counter and turned to leave, a small voice rose from the back of the room. I can help you, sir. The voice was young but firm. Everyone turned. A girl stepped out from the customer service desk. Simple white shirt, tiny name tag. Avery Monroe, intern. Her brown hair was neatly tied back, her eyes wide open but unwavering. Douglas frowned. Avery, what are you doing? She swallowed hard, but didn't back down. He is a customer. He has an account. And this money, whether in coins or bills, is still money. Lauren scoffed with contempt. Oh, great. Now the intern wants to teach us banking laws? Counting that mess will take you 3 days. Avery didn't look back. Then I'll work on it for 3 days. Beth jumped in. You don't understand the procedures. This isn't a playground. This is a real bank. Avery responded softly but clearly. And in a real bank, we should treat real people, like human beings. Douglas strode closer, his voice cold and stern. You are overstepping. I will be reporting this behavior to HR? Avery nodded. Yes, sir. But before that, I'd like to help him deposit his money. Properly, every coin. Malcolm looked at her. His eyes softened. Something cracked slightly in his hardened shell. a small opening where trust could slip through. He spoke. "What's your name?" "Avery, sir. Avery Monroe." "Thank you, Avery Monroe." He placed the sack back on the counter. Avery gently put on gloves and pulled up a chair. She began counting each roll, checking each coin, entering every line of data as if she were handling bars of gold. She looked at no one. She listened to no one, only focused with respect for each faded coin in her hands. Douglas turned away. Lauren shook her head in frustration. Beth pursed her lips to stop from cursing. A few customers quietly took out their phones, recording the small intern girl diligently working through the coins while the rest of the room simply stood and judged. Nearly an hour later, the transaction was complete, the amount confirmed, the receipt printed. Malcolm accepted it with both hands and gave Avery a small bow, one that conveyed more gratitude than any words could. "Today you helped me believe in goodness again." Avery blushed. "I was just doing what's right, sir. And that's the hardest thing to do. In a room full of people doing wrong." Malcolm walked away, quietly, without accusation, without a retaliatory glance. But the footsteps he left behind on the cold tiled floor would stay in that room forever. Behind the counter, Douglas Crane picked up his phone, his eyes heavy as lead. "Avery Monroe," he said flatly, "you can pack your things. We don't need people who break the rules here." Avery looked at him. No surprise, no protest. She simply nodded, then returned to her life 0845 a.m. The next morning, the EverTrust branch headquarters at the downtown intersection was as busy as ever. Inside, the teller stations were lit up. The scent of latte coffee, the clatter of keyboards, the whir of receipt printers, and the rhythmic tapping of high heels filled the air. It all seemed like just another normal morning. Lauren sipped her latte and said to Beth, "Last night I told my boyfriend about that old man. We laughed for an hour. That bag of coins. I thought it was a movie prop." Beth laughed too. "Yeah, and that silly intern, what was her name? Avery, total desk hero material. Sad but dumb." In the back, Douglas Crane was adjusting his tie in the conference room mirror. He had just submitted the weekly report, still listing the branch as high-performing with 97% customer satisfaction. Everyone thought the events of the previous day were over, but they were wrong. 9:01 a.m. The revolving glass doors opened. Two men in black suits stepped inside, eyes unblinking, expressions emotionless. 1 second later, they stopped and moved to the side, making way for someone. Then, he entered. Malcolm Everett. No baseball cap, no worn coat or squeaky cart. Now he was a powerful businessman in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, a slim black tie, and a walk that made every step feel like a judgment. The branch lobby fell dead silent. Douglas stepped out, pale as a sheet. Lauren dropped her latte. Beth jumped to her feet. Chadley snatched his phone and immediately deleted yesterday's mocking text. Malcolm stood in the center of the lobby, slowly scanning each face. No rush, no smile. His gaze was both a mirror and a verdict. He spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "I'm Malcolm Everett. I founded this bank in 1998. I built it from the ground up so that ordinary people could have a place to deposit their trust, not just their money." He paused. "Yesterday I came here, not as a CEO. I came as an ordinary customer." Lauren held her breath. Chadley stepped back. Douglas tried to interject. "Mr. Everett, Malcolm raised a hand. "I haven't asked you anything yet. Yesterday, I brought in $154,820. Every coin was legal, counted, verified, compliant. And I was rejected, not because of procedure, not because of policy, but because in your eyes, I was just a poor old black man." No one spoke. No one dared. A customer pulled out their phone to start recording, because they knew this was the moment truth was being called by name. Malcolm turned to Douglas. "You are the branch manager. Yesterday, you stood 6 meters away. Did you hear me being humiliated?" Douglas stammered, I just saw the staff were busy." "No, you saw, but you chose to look away." Then he looked at Lauren. You told me to go home and count my money. You laughed when you saw me carrying coins. You said this bank wasn't a recycling depot. Lauren lowered her head. She didn't argue. Malcolm turned toward the customer service desk, the empty spot where a young woman had sat the day before. And there was only one person who had no authority, no formal contract, no one backing her, yet dared to say, "I'll help you." He nodded. The conference room door opened. Avery Monroe stepped in. Her hair was tied low, a simple white shirt, holding a notebook and some files. She walked slowly, eyes slightly red, but she didn't lower her head. The entire room froze. Malcolm looked her straight in the eye. "Yesterday, you did the hardest thing. You kept your conscience intact in a room where everyone else had lost theirs. And today, I want you to know, you are not alone anymore." He turned to Douglas. "As of this moment, you are no longer the branch manager." Douglas stood frozen. He looked at Lauren, Beth, Chadley. "I will not allow people who treat others with contempt to work at a place that represents trust. And if any of you thought I was just a pitiful old man yesterday, today, you will understand that I decide who stays." Security entered. Douglas, Lauren, Chadley were asked to leave. No one resisted. Beth screamed, "Just because of an old man with coins?" Malcolm turned gently. Because you forgot that people don't come to a bank to be judged. They come to be served with trust, with kindness." He looked at Avery. "Starting today, you will be executive fellow in the office of the CEO, an executive trainee working directly with me." Avery's eyes welled up. "I didn't do it for a reward." Malcolm nodded. "That's why you deserve it more than anyone." The customers applauded. The remaining staff bowed their heads, and EverTrust, for the first time in many years, relearned the meaning of the word trust. 3 days later, EverTrust Tower, headquarters, 41st floor. This was not a regular meeting. It was a courtroom without a gavel, governed not by law, but by awakening. Throughout the expansive glass room, sleek black leather chairs were arranged neatly around a 12-meter conference table. Nearly 60 people sat there, regional directors, branch managers, and department heads from across the country, adjusting their ties, phones face down on the table, their eyes filled with a mix of concern and curiosity. At the center of the room, there were no projectors, no digital boards. Only an old, worn canvas bag was placed solemnly atop the table. Malcolm Everett walked in. He needed no introduction, no assistant to call his name, no laptop or flashy presentations. He simply stood tall, placed a hand on the canvas bag, and began with a sentence that sent a hush across the room. "This is what led me to call this meeting." He opened the bag and pulled out a handful of coins, tarnished, aged, discolored. One by one, he placed them on the polished wood table, their metallic clinks sounding strangely out of place amid the expensive cologne and fluorescent lights. $154,820. Inside here, every coin deposited with trust and received with disdain. A branch manager from Texas spoke up. "Mr. Everett, I believe that was an isolated incident, not representative of the entire system." Malcolm raised his hand, his eyes intense. "You're half right. It started at one branch. But what unsettles me most is that no one spoke up. The whole system stayed silent, and that is no longer an isolated case, it's a culture." He placed a thick stack of documents on the table, nearly 40 pages. The bold title read, "List of 39 customer rejections based on perceived ineligibility, January to September." Some were turned away for wearing wrinkled shirts. Some were asked for extra ID even when documentation was complete, because they spoke Spanish. Some were escorted out by security for standing too long near the deposit machine. All of them were either poor, people of color, or not wearing suits. The room fell silent, not out of fear, but because their consciences had been struck. Malcolm looked each of them in the eye. His voice was slow and sharp, slicing through the velvet fabric of corporate pretense. "I didn't build EverTrust so it could become a club for people who look like rich customers. I built it so everyone could deposit money, hope, and be treated with dignity. The reform begins today. Malcolm opened a large envelope and pulled out a 5-part plan stamped in red. Confidential CEO Directive. He read each point slowly and clearly, as if writing every word into EverTrust's history. Unannounced culture audits. Starting next week, a special internal investigation team will visit each branch, anonymously interviewing staff and customers. No notifications, no warnings, no compromises. Any manager who knew and did nothing will be removed. Mandatory human dignity communication training. All frontline employees, from new hires to supervisors, will undergo specialized training, respect protocol, distinguishing service skills from human discrimination. No pass, no work. Reinstating the Undercover CEO program. I and the vice presidents will resume quarterly undercover walks, appearing as ordinary customers at branches. Anyone could be me, and anyone could either fail or be recognized. New role, Value Guardian. In every region, one person like Avery Monroe will be appointed to represent the voices of minority customers, the vulnerable, the excluded. They will not report to the branch manager but directly to the Executive Council. Justice and Kindness Fund, $5 million per year. A portion of our profits will be used to compensate customers wrongfully treated, fund scholarships for interns or frontline staff who act with integrity and courage, and finance community projects combating discrimination. This is not charity, this is responsibility. Malcolm closed the document, placed both hands on the table, and lowered his voice with the weight of someone who had been misjudged his entire life because of his skin color. If you believe this reform will weaken us, I won't stop you from resigning. But if you're ready to help us become the most ethical bank in America, I invite you to stay. Because I will no longer let people in suits who've lost their humanity lead EverTrust one day more. Silence. Then chairs shifted. Then applause. Not for celebration, but because they had been awakened. 7:47 p.m., 41st floor, CEO office. Most of EverTrust's building had already gone dark. Only the faint glow remained from a wide window that overlooked the city slowly sinking into night. Malcolm Everett stood leaning beside the glass, his suit jacket removed, an every cup of ginger tea in his hand, his gaze distant as if rereading his own life across the streets below. The door behind him opened softly. Avery Monroe entered quiet, composed as always. But today her footsteps carried something heavier, more mature. "I'm here, sir." Malcolm didn't turn around. He simply said gently, "Have a seat. I want to share something, not as your CEO." She sat on a single chair, silent. Her hands rested neatly on her lap. No recording device, no assistant, no script. Just sincerity, the same thing Avery had used to win the heart of an entire corporation. Malcolm poured more tea and placed a cup in front of her. "Do you know why I didn't reveal who I was that day?" Avery shook her head softly. "Because you wanted to see the truth without making people afraid?" Malcolm smiled faintly, still gazing out at the darkening sky. "Partly, but more deeply, I wanted to see if anyone would choose to stand on the side of what's right, even when there were no cameras, no rewards, and no one to back them up." He turned to face her. "And that day, you were that person." Avery lowered her eyes, slightly embarrassed. "I just thought, if I were you, I'd want someone to stand with me, and I didn't want to be the one who looked away." Malcolm nodded. "That's rare, not intelligence, backbone. The spine of a leader doesn't come from their title, but from their ability to endure the gaze of the majority while walking against the current." Silence. Only the soft sound of hot tea tapping the porcelain, and the glow of warm light on the faces of two people, one old, one young, but bound by the same ideal. Malcolm continued. "When I was your age, I used to work as a waiter. One day, a wealthy customer came in and ordered a $500 glass of wine. As I brought it out, I accidentally spilled a drop on his collar. He didn't yell, didn't demand compensation. He just asked, 'What do you think matters more, this drop of wine or how you handle it afterward?' I apologized. He smiled and said, "Then you still know how to feel shame. That's something even people with MBAs often can't learn." Avery remained quiet. Malcolm looked her directly in the eye. "Avery, never let anyone make you believe that kindness is weakness. It is the quietest kind of strength, and it is the foundation of every lasting institution." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering not from emotion, but because for the first time, she saw a leader who truly believed in doing right without dressing it up. "What position do you intend for me long-term, sir?" Malcolm chuckled softly. "I don't intend to keep you in any one place. You weren't born to sit still. You were born to make others rise." A pause. Then Malcolm spoke again, his voice like the closing line of a memoir. "You are proof that, when the whole world turns away, just one person standing firm is enough to shift the fate of an entire system." Avery said nothing. She simply nodded and carried in her heart a truth she would one day pass on to the hundreds of employees she would lead. Power doesn't come from position, it comes from dignity and the choice not to stay silent in the face of what's wrong. Outside, the city lights glowed one by one. EverTrust, after all these years, had restarted its heart from a sack of coins and from a young woman who dared to walk toward what was right. 6 months later, EverTrust branch on Ellis Street, once the site of one of the most shocking internal PR incidents in company history, now looked completely different. The glass doors gleamed, no longer clouded with frustration or judgmental glances. A new sign hung proudly above the entrance. Pilot Branch, leading in fair service and trust. Supervisor, Avery Monroe. Avery stepped out from the teller hall, no longer in an oversized shirt or with a tiny name tag reading intern. Today, she wore a new silver name badge that caught the light, Regional Trust Advocate. She didn't look like a manager, but no one needed her to. Because to the customers here, she was the one who made them feel seen again after years of simply being someone in line. On an early summer morning, as she was guiding new staff near the service desk, an older woman entered. Her salt and pepper hair was tied with a worn elastic, her ash gray knit dress faded, and in her arms she clutched a plastic bag tightly. She walked slowly, her eyes scanning the room as though afraid of being turned away. Avery spotted her instantly. She walked over and smiled as if she had known the woman for years. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" The woman looked at her, cautious. "I just want to deposit a little money. Probably not much." She pulled out a small roll of crumpled $1 bills. "I've been saving it for months, and honestly, I was once turned away by a bank because I didn't dress nice enough." Her voice cracked. But Avery didn't say anything right away. She simply took the money gently, placing it on the counter like it was a precious artifact. "Here, you are always welcome. It's not about how much you bring, it's about the trust you bring with it." The woman burst into tears. "I read the story. I know you were the one who helped that old man. Thank you. Because of you, I finally had the courage to come back to a bank." Avery held her hand firmly. "I just did what was right, ma'am. But I promise from now on, we will never let anyone feel small just because their wallet is thin." Upstairs on the 41st floor of headquarters, Malcolm Everett quietly watched via the live surveillance feed. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to be seen. He simply stood, cup of tea in hand, and nodded softly as though offering a blessing from afar. EverTrust had changed, not through advertisements, but through action. Every branch now had a value guardian, a representative voice for the underrepresented. Customer complaint rates had dropped by over 40%. Each quarter, at least 3 undercover visits were made by disguised senior executives posing as customers. One former employee, Chadley, who had been terminated, sent an anonymous email to Avery. "I used to look down on you. I laughed at your kindness. But now, I wish I'd had the courage to stand with you that day." Avery didn't reply. She simply printed the email and pinned it to the wall of thanks next to dozens of handwritten notes from customers who had once felt they weren't worthy of being called clients. And then one day, Malcolm received a question from a journalist. "Mr. Everett, what would you say is the most important leadership decision of your career?" He paused for a few seconds, then answered, "It was the moment I chose to do nothing. I simply stepped back and let a young woman do the right thing when no one else dared." The story began with a sack of coins an old man mocked and an intern who refused to bow her head. But it didn't end there. It lived on in every customer's smile, every nod from a staff member welcoming someone in worn-out sandals, and every time humanity is reminded, kindness is not a weakness. It is the starting point of every great change. What about you? Have you ever been judged based on how you looked, or witnessed someone being treated unfairly and didn't know if you should speak up? If you were in this story, would you stay silent or step up like Avery did? Share your story in the comments below. Because maybe, just maybe, your story will inspire someone who's looking for a reason to stand on the side of what's right. And if you feel this story is worth sharing, don't hesitate to send it to those you care about. Because kindness is not weakness, it is a power that can change the world.